navigating through the turmoil and storms of life as individuals and as families. It's not a very encouraging topic because it suggests that we're going through storms and turmoil, and it's also a bit presumptuous in thinking that you can have anybody here who doesn't know how to navigate through such situations. But in my mother tongue, we have a hymn that we sing at church. I don't think anybody has ever heard it sung. Jeraga okaingema detosyangai siamoyo. And the song really says, tell me again, these things about life. I know them, I've heard them before, I'm inclined to forgetting, so tell me again and again. And that's what we do every Sunday. Depending on where you sit, you can decide whether there is a storm and turmoil or there isn't. And I know many people who think it's okay, but I also know others who think we are in a very bad place. So I ask, do you think that we are just being confused by prophets of doom and ultra pessimists who only see a half-empty glass and who don't see a half-full glass, which is a better story? I know there are people who feel very upset that we are so impatient with our president, and after 2 years, we are not giving him more time together with his team because they tell us that they desire and they know how to and are putting in place measures to transform Kenya into a first world country in record time. And when we watch television, they talk about it a lot. Notwithstanding the reassurances that come from them, there are some statistics that we get that are not that inspiring. For example, the Central Bank of Kenya, which monitors the performance of banks and publishes every quarter, on a serious note, but every month I think they give an indication, they tell us that this year, the proportion of non-performing loans in banks, the loans that have been lent to be repaid, but whose borrowers are not repaying. Some of them, because they don't want to, you always have a few people who borrow and they don't intend to pay. But you have many who borrow intending to pay and who, for some reasons, are unable to pay, have risen to about 700 billion Kenya shillings. That is 700,000 million shillings. It's a huge amount of money. Now, when central bank publishes, it looks like a statistics, but behind the NPLs, the non-performing loans, is the story of an individual or a corporate who borrowed with good intentions and with good plans, and on account of factors beyond their control, they have difficulty paying their loans, faced with foreclosures and loss of their assets because the banks are trying to recover their money. I don't think in here we have many people who are like that, who are caught up with loans that they have difficulty paying and threats that your car will be taken and your piece of land will be taken and whatever. But you may have relatives who are in such a situation. It doesn't matter what the president says when he has occasion to speak to us. If the NPLs are increasing, the story is not as rosy and good as he claims. But because he lives in a very well-guarded place where it's very difficult for you to see him, it's actually possible for him to be confined and isolated and quite unaware just how we are living. And because he also speaks sometimes from speeches that are written for him by people who are paid to write presidential speeches, it is possible for him to be out of turn with the reality that we are on and in, and you cannot blame him, because even you, if you have such a battery of many people to help you work and who help you to speak about what is going on, you will easily find yourself out of tune. The World Bank and IMF, who are the other people who scrutinize how countries are performing, have told us that in their projection, the next 2 years, we shall have negative growth in our GDP. Our economy will grow backwards instead of forwards. Our own central bank has also published this year that the projections for 2024 is a reduction of GDP from where we were when we began the year. We are growing backwards. These are not statistics that you can quarrel with. They are given by very credible people. So our ultra optimists, I would just encourage them to also appraise themselves of these statistics that are in the public domain. This is worrying in many ways, but I want to tell you very briefly one way in which it is worrying. Over the years, the economists in Kenya have tracked the behavior of the Kenyan economy in the 5-year cycle that relates to our election cycle. And they say that every year, when we are coming to an election, the economy dips. After the elections, it remains sluggish for a while as the new government finds its bearing, and then it peaks and reaches a crest somewhere around the mid-term of the government and parliament term. Nearer the next election, it goes down. And since 1963, this has been found to be the case. We've had two distortions on this trajectory. One was in 2008, after the post-election violence. Because of the mayhem that followed, the economy dipped to virtually about zero growth between January and March of 2008. But the magician Kibaki, who was our president then, found a way to pull us from the doldrums, and by the end of the parliamentary term in 2012, we were close to where we had been before the dip. This is the first time that cycle has gone berserk. Because we dipped as we came to the elections 2022, we really haven't peaked since the elections ended. And when we were just hoping we would fly, Central Bank and IMF are telling us we don't expect much growth in the next 2 years. Now, if you are Kenyan, you also know that at the end of the next 2 years, we shall be on the next election cycle. And the bickering and the noise will be very high. And the beating of the economy is likely to be the same. And so the outlook is not good. What I find surprising is that this is the first time since independence we have a government that very faithfully likes to score in its own goal. Ordinarily, a government tries to outdo the previous government. Even if it is the same government, like you re-elect a president, he tries to outdo his performance in the first cycle. But this time, we have a government that is faithfully inciting its own citizens and leading them to an uprising. For example, this year, we had a fiasco around the Finance Bill 2024. And you remember, no other than the president himself and a few of his trusted people, when there was noise that it was a terrible finance bill, the things it was saying about how they hoped to raise the money was offending many Kenyans. They told us, itapitishwa mpende msipende. Now that is grave. Because if you are telling your citizens you'll do what you want, whether they like it or not, it's a gamble. If they like it badly enough, they could actually put you in a spin. And that's what the Gen Zs did. They created an uprising, and even though it had passed to pende to sipende, the president decided to take the wisdom of Gen Zs and send it back to Parliament, where it was virtually repealed. As that debate was going on, the courts bastardized the Finance Bill 2023 and said it was unconstitutionally passed. Government went back to court. Fortunately, it was rescued by the Supreme Court. And so we are operating without a finance bill, a finance act. We are practically on autopilot economically, and the president is still tangering and promising. I'm not an economist, I'm a theologian, but you have economists here who should tell us on what basis is he tangering. Where will the money come from? How will it be organized? How will it be channeled? Will it hold together? And already we have very many promises that are not fulfilled. Maybe a miracle will happen so that he fulfills a few more. Totally unprovoked, this government that seems to like to incite its people, you wake up one morning and you are told, there is a total emergency. There is a guy called Deputy President who must be impeached so that he goes home quickly so that this country can hold together. And we are hearing that money may have exchanged hands in the National Assembly and in the Senate to create a vote that passes it, and it is passed. But this has generated litigation in the courts that may last a long time. It doesn't inspire Kenyans. It doesn't help to grow the economy. This is one of those things where a government scores a goal in its own court. Not to talk about the Adani colossal transactions that even the courts have said, now on this one, stop a bit so that we hear what the objectors are saying. And the wonderful bill that has just been brought back from public participation on how we can extend the presidential term by another 2 years so that it is 7 years. And the people who love the president are saying, this is how to grow the country. And those who are unsure are saying, another 2 years, we thought these two are bad enough. Can you add more? We are asking, how can it be shortened? Even though in my thinking, that bill was a mischief, brought so that we get very angry, so that the president does what he did the other day to say, this is a stupid bill, I wouldn't have anything to do with it, so that we think he's a good messiah. Kenyan politics is like that. But for the first time, we have numerous agricultural bills published that are totally obnoxious. I cannot tell why your mother and your auntie, leading their own quiet life, should be brought under the regime of bills on how they do their avocados and their bananas and their goats and their cows and their sheep. And if you want to do this, you'll pay a levy. If you don't follow the law, we shall give you a fine. And some of the fines I have seen mentioned in some of those bills are so crazy, I haven't seen that kind of money myself in one pile unless I have gotten a loan, which I no longer qualify to a lot because I am retired. And you ask that Geshagi woman, on what basis do you think she can pay a fine of 500,000 shillings? Because she kept cows without a license to keep cows. This government seems upset every time Kenyans appear happy and relaxed and going on with their lives. And it just seems to have this creativity that enables them to find something to do or say which will disrupt Kenyans who are otherwise getting on with their lives pretty well. So we seem to be on an economic meltdown that might stick with us for longer than we expected, fueled by insensitive knee-jerk economic policies, unpredictable taxation policies and regimes, runaway corruption. The bottom line, we have many multinationals that have closed shop and relocated to other places. And in closing shop, they close up the jobs. We have massive businesses that have just collapsed, unable to cope with the new regime that we are in, with massive layoffs of staff. I hear those who are salaried now are saying their earnings have been eroded because the money they used to earn, when you raise the taxes and increase the statutory deductions to the levels that there are, one man was telling me, because he earns a big salary, half of his salary goes, and he was telling me, you know, the next time we have an election, depending on the guys who are on offer, I know where I will not put my vote, not because of serious considerations, but I want to work for my money and eat it. I don't want to work for money that other people eat. But how does it play out in normal life? Families that have difficulty finding money for food. Families that have difficulty organizing for shelter. With difficulties paying for school fees and health care. Families threatened with foreclosures on account of non-performing loans, so that their cars and their houses are in danger of being auctioned by their creditors because they just can't pay for the loans. And many families are no longer making any investment looking at the future because coping today is hard enough. How do they organize for the next 10, 20 years when things are this bad? And this list can continue longer and longer. So we ask today, how can you navigate through all these things as a Christian? That is our topic for today. And the cure that I suggest today includes, number one, accept this as the reality. It really doesn't matter how we got here just now. Here is where we are. It doesn't matter whether we shall navigate out. I hope we shall, but we are here now. If you accept this is where we are, you'll be a faithful believer in what Ecclesiastes says in chapter 3, verse 1. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the sun. This is a season for a meltdown on the economy and great stress and strain economically for most families. This reality is a season we have entered into that will be with us possibly for the next 3 years or more, and whose effects will be felt much longer. Part of it is not really from God. Jeremiah says something in Jeremiah chapter 8 that you can resonate with. He says from verse 10b to 11, from the least to the greatest, all are greedy for gain. Part of what has brought here a sheer human greed in the lives of duty bearers who are paid to make Kenya work, who are trying to make themselves work at the expense of Kenya. And that is not new. Jeremiah already knew it in his day. He doesn't have kind things to say about prophets and priests. He says prophets and priests alike all practice deceit. They also lie. Saying that people go to church and the pastors massage them. He says they dress the wounds of my people as though they were not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. So Jeremiah gives a grim picture. Everyone is greedy for gain, trying to find how to get rich without really working, which is corruption by a common term that colors everything we do. The priests and prophets have actually demonstrated in the last 4 years that they can say things are okay when they are not, when many bishops and archbishops and clergy became self-appointed chaplains of election, especially presidential, one presidential candidate, not all. One of the others, we were told, people are not sure that he even is properly baptized. And the churches and the churchmen have given politicians such ample airtime at weddings, at funerals, at ordinations, at retreats, at harambes, and the politicians have spent the last 4 years maligning their competitors, and after the elections, creating scapegoats for everything that did not work. I have pity for a man whose mother is called Genda. The things that have been said about him cannot be done by one man in churches. We have said, peace, peace, when there was no peace. And the wounds are dressed as though they are not serious. But a few are beginning to speak. And last Sunday we had drama. You know, I was here saying very curly things. And Wairimu was in her church saying even more radically the things I was trying to say. And a few clergy are beginning to speak. Maybe we shall come out of the stupor and say it as it is. The situation is bad. It's likely to get much worse before it gets better. And maybe by a divine miracle, we may get other players. So as a person, as a family, part of this strategy for an effective navigation is to accept this reality and understand it accurately that things are not okay. Number two, if the situation is as grim as it appears, assess how is it affecting you? And what trajectory is it showing for you in your life and that of your family? Because this is a national situation, you can disconnect it with your own personal life, but somewhere along the way, you and Kenya will choma the same way. So if you see clearly where we are, you must begin to ask, how does this affect me? How has it revised your net income downwards? If you look at your pay slip, what language do you see? Are you still keeping your job? You are blessed because some people have lost their jobs. But do you think that you'll be able to keep your job so that it survives this meltdown until it is over? There is actually uncertainty for many employed people whether they will keep their jobs. How is it affecting your revenues in business if you are a business person? What trajectory do you see for yourself? How are you coping with shifting expenses? And how is this likely to unfold in the short and medium term for you? If you do not tackle these questions now, chances are down the road, you'll be finding yourself dealing with quagmires that you may have managed differently if you had appreciated in good time at mambo ni mabaya. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 20 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fears gulp theirs down. Proverbs says one of the ways of dealing with these things is changing your consumption habits, not gulping everything you get down quickly, but storing some for the next time when there may be lack. You know, the trouble with many people is their inability to assess their situation accurately and use the information they generate to reorder their lives accordingly. Too many of us are so conservative, we try to maintain the same habits that we have lived with, no matter how the circumstances around us change. And some of the catastrophes some people face is because when the signals came, they did not read them. But they were so Christian and full of faith. They said, God will deal with this. Now, God is able to deal with it, but God does expect you to deal with the things around you personally, and you ask for his help to move them to the next level. But if you watch, you could easily feel some pain. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 to 7, but godliness and contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. So you must review your real needs for you and your family, and ask yourself, given the constraints you have, the gloomy economic outlook ahead, the resources you have available now, and the trajectory you can see, you must ask, how can you best meet your real needs? Forget about the wants that can wait. Real needs cannot wait. And I make a few suggestions in passing. They may not be relevant for one or two of us, but many people might find them useful. One of them is making dietary decisions which can reduce your food bills. You can make a few changes. I was telling the other guys in the other service that looking at me, if you look at me, and if you look at my wife, the Lord has blessed us in many ways. You can tell that we have eaten a greater share of the things of this world than was prudent. So one of the ways is to reduce the amount of food you eat. Eat less and utilize some of what is in your storage of food. Children need to eat a lot because they are growing, but most of you have stopped growing. You are actually messing yourself by eating. And you can cut bills. You don't have to eat lunch expensively in hotels. Maybe you recall when we were younger, people used to carry a lunchbox. Find a man, the ugali that is eaten overnight, a little of it is left, and veggies, it is warmed and put in a food flask, and he carries and he eats in the office. Rather, many people can't afford a meal in town. So eat what you can or stay hungry and eat in the evening. You can also change your source of food ingredients. Just by buying at the kiosk outside your house, most people pay 4 or 5 times what the ingredients are costing in the market. Or buying in bulk in wholesale shops. You can cut your costs. You may find that your pre-crisis food budget might still be enough for your needs now if you make sensible decisions. We try to shop in the market. One of the jobs I do is to drive my wife occasionally when I can, park at the market. She takes an hour, looks for many things, brings them, drive her back home, and you see how healthy I am. Not as expensively as some people are who you can see. Where do you live? For those who rent homes, some people have trouble just raising the rent year in, year out. And you may find that by changing your living address, you can actually save money that is substantial. God did not design that when you are going through hard times, you make landlords happy who have built in exquisite locations. You can actually look for landlords who have built in other places and are willing to take lower amounts of money for rent, and the difference you save and put it in more useful things. I've known people who actually sold their houses sometimes and bought houses in cheaper places. That doesn't stop them from going back to the locations they love when the times get better. Where do your children go to school? If things are elephant, just by changing the school that your children go to, you may dramatically reduce your expenses. Such colossal sums of money are being paid by people for education of their children in kindergarten, and it's okay if things are going well. But at kindergarten, they don't learn too much so that they will pass their exams because of what they learned in kindergarten. Some of them is called play school. And you can play at home or play anywhere else and be okay. You know, the choice of the schools where your children will go is not made in heaven. God can handle your children going to a whole variety of schools, including public schools, if your resources have placed you there for a time. It's not forever, but for the time that you are there. And I speak for the men a bit, because I do know a few men try to make such decisions, but their wives resist very much because of very legitimate reasons. The wives ask, if we move our children from the school where they are going now to another one, isn't that telling people that we are facing hard times? Do you go announcing to everyone that you are in trouble? Chances are they are in as much trouble as you are. And they are face saving by hanging on expenses that are beyond them for now. Your move might be what might legitimize. They are also looking at their challenges and their problems. And since your children are likely to be going to a better school than some of you went to, what is the big deal? Do you even need to drive? Every day? And what type of car do you need to drive? This is more for the men who think that the car they drive makes a point that they want to keep made. Maybe, but to who? The average person who sees you driving doesn't know you. Does not know where you came from, does not know where you work, does not know why you bought that car. If you are in a demio, they'll be okay because they'll just give you way. And some people who are in trouble can actually change their cars. There are cars which people are driving when they are very broke, which if you sold, you can find another car and the saving can push you for a few days. You may also find that there are expenses that you can suspend or freeze without much loss of dignity or value. You can learn something from the animals, which in winter, some of them hibernate, they slow down, they slow their heart rate, they stop eating much, they keep and conserve their energy and wait for winter when things are better, then they flourish and come out again. They are smarter than us. Because too many of us, when the situation is not good, we put a face and hang on rather than take those resilience-building measures that are possible. All the trees, which you drive past and see as the seasons change, sometimes they shed their leaves. And they're saying there's not enough water and moisture to keep us thriving and going as we were. Let us shed the leaves and need less water and energy and keep cool, chill, and wait. When things get better, they flourish again. In the face of a recession and great political and economic uncertainty, you may want to do those things that increase your resilience. You sometimes will need to make a thorough appraisal of your situation. It is okay then to make radical survival and resilience decisions so that the resources you have carry you through. As and when things get better, and you have survived so that the better times find you, because the better times may come and not find some people watakuwa wameenda, you can make those decisions again and restore yourself to the places you are used to. Then you join Paul, who says what? Philippians chapter 4, verse 12 and 13. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And that is resilience par excellence. My fourth tool of navigating through hard times is by increasing your income and closing your deficit gap. You can actually create new income and totally change your financial trajectory. In some of my reading, I bumped into information that the average American millionaire, from research studies, has 7 different streams of income. Millionaires have learned the art of spreading their risk across many different categories of investment so that as shocks are felt in one sector, they have a fallback onto another sector that may be thriving. Did you know that the Bible, thousands of years earlier, actually prescribed the same? That diversifying is one of the best survival skills. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 2, give portions to 7, yes, to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. And Solomon is saying, don't invest only in one line, invest in 7, maybe 8, because you don't know where a disaster will hit. And if you have spread your risks, when the disaster hits, you are likely to have a place to stand. Verse 6 of the same chapter, he says, sow your seed in the morning, and at evening do not let your hands be idle, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, whether both will do equally well. Part of the gravity and precariousness of the situation some people are in, and why some people get under great stress, is the concentration of risk in only one area. I guess many people here have concentrated all their risks on an 8-to-5 job. My brother, my sister, however much you earn, whatever trappings you are given by your employer, this only one stream of income makes you perpetually vulnerable in many ways, and may be the reason one day you might feel tremendous pain that you wish you may have avoided. But you know how much the one risk concentration secures us. It enables you to go to sleep because someone else is carrying the headache for you. Until one day you read a letter and you are told the company has decided to downsize. And the CEO's pen fell on your name. You are the one to go. You know about the ones who work in banks. No matter how frequently fellows are being sent away from banking, at the age between about 42 and 50, the more fellows working in banks think they will retire there. Banks now don't generally allow people to get gray hair as I have while they are working before they retire. So within your limitations, this may be a season for you to explore what are the options of investment and income generation you can try and explore. It can be a soul-searching time when, as a couple, between you and your husband, you and your wife, you may agree what is it you can do to generate additional income as a new stream of income. How can you do that? Which of you would take responsibility of stewardship and oversight for such a new portfolio that you create for yourselves? And you may find that if you choose well and do your research robustly and utilize the expert advice that is available, and in this church you have an oversupply of good competence and advice in business that you can draw from, and the pastor can organize for people who need to start something and people who know how things are started to meet and help each other. And you send the fees to the bishop. You may unleash your idle potential, your latent, untapped potential, and you may be on course to a good return. I put it to you that with your education and skill, your experience and aptitudes generally in this church, this crisis should be a wake-up call for you. So that corporate and that enterprise, that manufacturing plant, that service outlet God has been speaking to you about and equipped you for, which you hesitate to start, this may be the time for you to consider starting it. I suggest that there are Kenyan families that are going without food because even though you are endowed and gifted, you have refused to venture in a line that can generate for you new income, and as you do that, feed other families and employ people who need jobs. There may be some people whose destinies are in abeyance just because you've been sitting on your laurels. And if you wake up and pull yourself by the boots and try to do something new, you might discover you may be a blessing to many people who might begin to pray for you. During COVID, when it came, my wife is one of those people who utilizes her abilities. We sat and increased salaries for some of the people working for us in our very Juakali and basic enterprises that a historian and CRI teacher and a theologian can do without a disaster and a crisis. Even now, on a normal week, she'll employ about 10. In peak times, 30. It's very nice for people to eat dinner in their homes because they earned a wage from something you have done as God has gifted you. It's very nice for families to be praying, God bless our employer. We know things are not going well in the economy. Uphold the employer so that the employer can hold us. You know, there are no people who God will raise to turn around this economy for the better if the people adequately endowed refuse to do what is within their power to do. Because we must end, I'll transition now to begin to end this thing. The things I have said and the things we are reading in the press don't quite inspire, and they make many people almost feel hopeless. They wonder, how shall we pull out of the mess that we appear to be in? The Lord is with you and is with me. This situation of Kenya, God understands it more than you do. Just what ought to be done, He knows much better than you or I will know. And when you engage in this conversation and you begin to pray and ask for God's direction, He is eager to help you because He understands. In Isaiah chapter 43, verses 2 to 3a, He says, when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. Psalms 46, verses 1 and 2, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. These are the reassuring words that God gives us. God's tremendous promises are yes and amen. They are for our reassurance and our encouragement. And even in this situation, even in this church, there are numerous testimonies. If people had a chance to share, where they would tell you how God has delivered them in this season from tragedies that they thought had done them. They can tell you his provision, miracles, and interventions that he has brought their way when they thought mambo imekwisha. They might tell you testimonies of how God has scattered their enemies who came against them from one direction, and God scattered in 7 directions. It's not a reason for us to be careless, for us to do nothing. It's an inspiration that as we try, God is with us, he understands, and if we step out in faith, God will protect us and carry us through. And where human effort can't get you, God can get you, because he's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He says in Psalms 50 verse 15, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you will honor me. So let us wrap this up with Paul's boldest declaration and assurance of divine transformation of our challenges to become vessels of good and benefit. Romans 8, verse 28, you know that by heart, just say it. Romans 8, 28. Just say it. You are shy. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purposes. It's what Joseph understood in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, when he said to his brothers who had sold him as a slave in Egypt, you intended this for harm, for my harm, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. History and the church is littered with the stories of men and women who found themselves in the worst of circumstances. And God came and took those circumstances and used them as raw materials to create a transformational outcome that turned out their lives much better than they had imagined. Some of them basically celebrating that they went through hard times because God did new things for them. I can tell you only one. Never mind that we are spilling over a little. In one of my jobs, I've been employed many times, in many places. My boss just hated me. And he figured out that he would fire me and put me through a lot of trouble. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a very simple, local fellow who do not have very complex things. So when I am under attack, I even look more ordinary and helpless. In this particular time, even newspapers published that I was in trouble. And there were television clips saying the way there is a crisis where I work and I am the target. And then God delivered me from that. Because I got a revelation. I said, my boss doesn't like me. But I'm working in my father's house. And if my boss hates me enough so that both of us cannot fit, my boss leaves, not me. Then later, after some years, I went for an interview for another job. And in this interview, I was asked the question, Canon Karanja, tell us, why you fought so hard? We read stories about you being fought. And I will not tell you what I said. But Bishop, I was told later, when they were evaluating the candidates, they said, this guy called Karanja has shown resilience because the troubles he has been through and weathered, the troubles that we can see ahead in this job we are evaluating for, we think this is the guy who can handle. And the other guys were left. Isn't that a nice thing, David? Wouldn't you like to go trouble so that the trouble you go through is used as raw materials by God for the journey ahead, for him to do something for you, to distinguish you from those who have not been through so much trouble. You know, the comfort of a Christian is that in God there is no wasted pain. And if you're going through a painful season, the pain is real, but it works for good. All you need to do is to ask God to reveal to you, in his time, the good he is working out through the pain you may be going through. There are no wasted tears. So if you had to shed tears because of the trouble you've gone through, take heart. God regards as such treasure our tears. When we shed them, he commissions the angels and tells them, see the tears that our daughter has shed, our son. Find a way to work out something good out of those tears so that they will thank God they shed tears. There is no wasted time. Even when you feel that you are frozen, everything is at a standstill, nothing is working, God will use that time to work out something good. There is no wasted effort. And people can't cheat you from your sweat and labor. Even when you think you've been taken advantage of, God will use that to work out some good for you. Even when wicked people try to fix and destroy you, even when inept, corrupt, and malicious people set you up and execute mischief around you, that which they do, God uses as raw materials to make some good for you. Even when government policies are aligned against you, even when you downgrade your life to cope with what could have been avoidable situations, God takes those regrettable, painful, and unsatisfactory actions and circumstances, maneuvers and losses and drawbacks brought by Satan and wicked people, and he turns them round for good. He uses them as raw materials to fashion some good for you. And so you can look at Kenya in our current challenges and difficulties and thank God. Tell him, God in heaven, we know you are using this to work out some good for us as a nation.